Greetings and salutations. This is the voice of Loquacious of Herd, bringing you his afterthoughts on My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Season 6, Episode 6, titled No Second Prances. I heartily suggest you find and watch the episode itself, sans commentary, before proceeding with either this Afterthoughts review or viewing my full blind reaction, which is hosted at the link in the description. Be warned, this Afterthoughts review will contain spoilers for the episode. With that out of the way, a note before we move on to the review itself. This Spoken Herd review for the episode is the second of my longer Spoken Herd segments. Going forward, these Spoken Herd Afterthoughts reviews will take the place of my earlier Written Herd segments. I went into this episode a bit less blind than usual. Some time ago, I had heard rumors that Trixie was to make a return appearance in Season 6, and I had more recently heard a rumor that this episode might be the moment of her great and powerful reappearance. I was quite pleased to see the episode beginning with a focus on Starlight Glimmer and Twilight Sparkle. Seeing the teacher and pupil relationship between the two gives, I find, the opportunity for character growth for both of them, and from the get-go, it was clear they were still struggling a bit with their new roles. Twilight's table service friendship lesson had a very flailing about in the dark, trying to come up with something helpful feel to it. Starlight's distracted, only half listening to her mentor's just going for it, felt to me like Starlight was approaching her tasks as problems to be solved as swiftly and efficiently as possible, rather than as experiences to embrace, study, digest, and actually learn lessons from. This opening scene, like much of the rest of the episode, serves to highlight the, sometimes rocky, relationship transition that Starlight and Twilight are still going through. Twilight might be forgiven for being extra stressed, to the point of near uselessness as a teacher, by the upcoming visit from Princess Celestia. Sure, Twilight's no longer Celestia's student, but her peer, no longer so much mentor and protege as senior and junior partners. But Twilight still clearly idolizes Celestia, and more than anything, wants to prove herself to her old instructor. So this upcoming dinner would seem to be the first major opportunity we know of for Twilight to really showcase how far along Starlight has come in the studies of friendship, which in turn reflects on how good a teacher Twilight herself is. Twilight, in short, is distracted, and her primary focus isn't on actually teaching Starlight about friendship, but on making a good impression on Celestia. Starlight, in turn, really doesn't seem to care about learning in nuance. Twilight's setting up problems, and she's knocking them down as fast as she can. It seems Starlight wants to power through those lessons, and considering what Twilight's teaching style would seem to be like, who can blame her? So the task is given, make a new friend. No, not be friendly with someone Starlight already knows, not forge a closer relationship with one of their mutual friends. Find someone largely unknown, and become friends with them, within a little over 24 hours. That's a tall order. I can certainly understand being very unsure about that task, and a retreat into humor is a fine way to both cover that up and to boost one's own courage. I consider it a good sign that Starlight is comfortable enough with her reformed state to poke fun at her earlier self, by making jokes about the sort of terrible things she might have done once in a similar situation. There's some interesting subtext in the joke, too. In some ways, it seems to me, Starlight is saying, sure, I'll be trying to make a new friend, but I don't feel like I can succeed. But hey, time to modify expectations. Even if I fail entirely, it wouldn't be worse than some of the other stuff I've done, right? Right? It's almost like Starlight is looking for a bit of reassurance from Twilight here, and Twilight still misses social cues, especially when Twilight's dealing with her own performance anxiety. Starlight, though, goes out to give it the old college try. Cue a series of quick scenes as each of the remaining main six try to help Starlight out. The big takeaway I had from all of this was that the main six have adjusted to Starlight's new status, possibly better than the fandom has, and are genuinely trying to help her be a better pony. Heck, Starlight even has some valuable experiences, teachable moments in this sequence. The most important, and telling one I feel, is the attempt at friendship with Big Mac. He isn't acting how she wants, so she defaults to using magic to compel him to act in a way she finds preferable. Only afterwards does she actually consider that this isn't a nice thing to do, and perhaps she shouldn't do such things. Starlight's realization that she still has considerable work to do on her baseline interactions with other ponies, that she still has deeply ingrained bad habits that will take considerable work and attention to undo, is actually a pretty big step forward. It serves to show both that she is trying to reform her worst nature and that she's still struggling with it. Sometimes she's unaware she's misbehaving at all. Clock is ticking, and still no new friends. A quick trip to the spa to try to relax, as Starlight is clever enough to note that her own rising stress levels are actively hindering her attempt at friend-making. And lo, at the spa, with the pressure off, while casually chatting with another customer, she finds some pony with whom she shares an emotional connection, a common bond. Here, at last, is another pony who has done bad things and continues to be harshly judged for that past misbehavior, but who is, at their heart, simply trying to be the best pony they can be. Starlight has made a friend, all on her own, someone who she can relate to in ways she can't relate to any of the other main six. While there is no visible time skip from Twilight's earlier comments, I must assume that it is the following morning that Starlight races back to the castle to introduce her mentor to her great and powerful new friend. And the meeting is glorious. Trixie is still just as ego-driven as before, and she hasn't put her old clashes with Twilight entirely behind her. And Twilight, given Trixie's apologies and reformation at the end of Magic Duel, clearly doesn't trust Trixie as far as she can throw her, which, I find, is perfectly understandable. Twilight would have a much easier time forgiving Starlight, I feel, and accepting her reformation than she would Trixie, because of the nature of their respective crimes. Starlight's grief, pain, and madness-fueled actions were largely focused on ponies who were strangers. Sure, she also went up against the main six, but there was nothing personal about her stripping the lot of them their cutie marks. After her defeat, when it came time for her revenge, Starlight went after Twilight specifically. Starlight wasn't about punishing the other ponies, and when she did injury to the rest of the main six, that was all secondary, done as a means to hurt Twilight herself. In the clash of the two lights, Starlight's focus made their confrontations all about Twilight. And Twilight can forgive wrongs done to her. She's done so, and Starlight is now a new friend. But Trixie. Her initial bad impression, way back in Ghostbusters, was due to an overbearing ego and some quite understandable, and in some ways even appropriate, show ponyship. Of course, carnival performers talk themselves up. Trixie was engaging in the time-honored bragging traditions of Barnum and Bailey, or any number of performers. Sure, she took it a shade too far and went out of her way to humiliate any pony speaking out against her, but this is also in character with her. So from the first, Trixie's meaner streak was focused not on Twilight, but on Twilight's friends. And when Trixie, corrupted by dark magic, returned, sure, her jealousy-fueled magical duel with Twilight was intended to best a rival and drive him away, but her subsequent actions were to enslave the entirety of Ponyville and single out the rest of the main six for special mistreatment. Right up until Twilight managed to use Trixie's own magical specialty, sleight of hand, misdirection, and stage magic, to trick Trixie into relinquishing the truly evil source of Trixie's recent corruption, Trixie was focused on others. Thus, Trixie's crimes, while in some ways quite similar to Starlight's, were different in one very important respect. Twilight crossed Starlight, so Starlight went after Twilight Sparkle. Twilight crossed Trixie, so Trixie went after Twilight's friends. You don't mess with Twilight's friends. Harm done to Twilight herself, she can forgive. Harm done to the pony she cares about? Yeah, and that was clearly on display. I found Twilight's struggle to get over her antagonistic relationship with Trixie to be entirely consistent with her character, and I found Trixie's own reactions and stance to be perfectly in keeping with what we know of our favorite blue show pony as well. Worse, the pressure's on Twilight. She is sweating bullets, needing Starlight to make a good impression on Celestia at the dinner so as to help validate Twilight's own role as a teacher. Failure, in the eyes of Celestia, is entirely unacceptable. This is exactly the sort of pressure that Twilight has historically done very poorly with. I'm looking at you, Lesson Zero. So, Twilight's attempts to salvage this friendship scenario go poorly. Starlight remains remarkably mature and level-headed about the whole thing, and Trixie, for all her boastfulness and deep-seated need to be able to one-up her rivals, really does strike me as sincere in her friendship. Trixie admits to some of her flaws, and offers to let Starlight off the hook when it comes to the whole being friend things as a result. But Starlight herself understands the feeling of being judged. Whether or not others are even judging her is irrelevant. Starlight knows her own crimes and projects the difficulty she has in forgiving herself onto others. The bond between Starlight and Trixie grows closer. Each also has their issues with Twilight, which leads to Starlight's own lapse into bad behavior. Trixie's straight-up manipulation of her new friend to score points in her personal feud with the Princess of Friendship leads to Starlight siding with Trixie. Things come to a head. And I love Celestia's attitude through it all. When she shows up to the dinner to find a panicking Twilight trying desperately to pretend nothing is wrong, no sign of Starlight of it all, and a hastily and poorly thrown together last-minute attempt at making things look fine, Celestia is done. She's so done. I can almost see Celestia's thought processes. What can she do in this situation? Given Twilight's own edgy state, any attempt at even mild criticism and correction would likely just break her. It wouldn't help, it would only make the situation worse. Playing along and pretending all is good is likewise unhelpful and unhealthy in helping Twilight grow into a more confident pony around her old mentor. Twilight needs to learn that disappointing Celestia isn't going to be the end of the world. Unable to say anything, Celestia resigns herself to just sitting quietly through the ordeal. It's the least bad option available to her from a wide variety of bad choices. Twilight rushes off to the confrontation. A confrontation where we find the three principals in this little drama have all been behaving badly. The worst two offenders being Twilight and Trixie, with Starlight largely caught in the middle. It all comes crashing down. Not because Trixie doesn't genuinely like Starlight, or vice versa. Not because Twilight has some hidden problem with her student, or the other way around. Just because each of them has their own mental and emotional baggage, and their own personal bad habits. And sometimes, just like in real life, one can be blinded to the unintended consequences of one's own actions, and we can fail to see how we are hurting those we care about until after the damage has already been done. And then what is left is to pick up the pieces. Starlight took it hard. This was a betrayal of a new friendship by somebody who she thought really got her, who understood who she was and what she was going through. She felt she had been used by somebody who didn't actually value her or their friendship at all. This was a blow against her fundamental ability to trust. Could she ever trust that other ponies would want to truly be her friends rather than just use her? Trixie took it hard. This was the loss of her first real friend, at least in her adult life, and worst of all, it was entirely her own fault. Her personal issues, her ego, her near pathological need to be best, to beat a perceived rival, all this led to her acting in a way she would never have chosen to act otherwise. And for once, Trixie couldn't blame somebody else's meddling or circumstances. From Trixie's perspective, this was all her. And could she ever have the friendship she wanted when Trixie was, well, herself? Being who she was, did she even deserve friends, given how she could so easily slip up and mistreat them? And Twilight, her eyes finally opened to the very real problem in front of her, rather than the largely illusory and self-made problem of her internalized need to please Celestia, took it hard too. Trixie slamming her, curtain in Twilight's face was a ringing indictment of Twilight's status as the Princess of Friendship, and her failures in that regard. Through this all, Twilight had failed, and failed badly, at her core duty to the realm. Of all of them, Trixie, I feel, took it the worst. Without a plan B in mind, she went on stage for what she had every reason to believe would be her last time. It was either going to be forgiveness and the hope of friendship, or release from her cares. That's a dark, dark place for anyone to be in, much less a pony. Thankfully, Twilight helped Starlight with a quick bout of perspective and some genuinely good teacherly advice, and Starlight stepped up to the challenge of forgiveness, just in time as it turned out. And the episode draws to a close with a bit of humor. And with Cranky, though, how does Celestia get her maid to do that all the time? Well, other than magic, that much is obvious. In the end, I felt this was a very strong episode. It showcased the issues and problems inherent in Twilight and Starlight's new teacher-student relationship. We saw Twilight at her worst as a teacher, and Starlight struggling to be a good student through it all. Trixie's return was welcome, and I love her growing friendship with Starlight. I hope they continue that, perhaps even expand on it. Seeing Starlight and Trixie off together on a friendship mission would be delightful. I must say that I'm enjoying Starlight's role this season. Kudos to the writers for giving us fun episodes like this. If you wish to see my full reaction to My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, Season 6, Episode 6, titled No Second Prances, the link, as I mentioned earlier, is in the description. Feel free to leave any comments or likes for that reaction here on this Afterthoughts review. And until next time, as always, kindly remember, y'all are awesome. Stay awesome.